Hello. On Saturday morning, I I went to was it a record fair or something. I've been to it before. I think it was last year. I did a video about it. I think they have it twice a year. There's record fairs all over the place, but this particular one, the Mount Albert Record Fair, um, is a relatively big or well-known one, maybe. And so it was Saturday morning. Things started about 8:30. I got there about 10 because I had to. My kid goes to a on Saturday mornings. He has an extracurricular activity, so I dropped him off there at 9:30 and drove over to Mount Albert, which takes about 25 minutes from where I was. And it was busy. It was I think it was busier than last time, and I was only there for 15 minutes, so I'm sure it ebbs and flows and waxes and wanes throughout the day. But when I was there, it was pretty packed to the point that it was difficult to really look at a lot of things. But there were less CDs there this time than last time. I'd say the record to CD ratio was something like 80-20, whereas maybe last time it was more like 70-30. And I understand that. I understand why records are more popular amongst collectors, and it's the same in almost every music shop. There's more records than CDs nowadays. So but it was just something I noticed. So I kind of it didn't take me too long to kind of look at all the guys selling CDs, and there really wasn't much. There was some very overpriced stuff. There was one guy in particular who he kind of put notes, like on the front of every CD. He had a post-it note with kind of like something about the edition and maybe some information about it, like UK edition, second release or something like that. And then he felt that gave him the right to then charge like $20 or $30 for fucking run-of-the-mill secondhand CDs that you'd find in a secondhand shop for $1. So I'm not sure what was going on there, but maybe he felt this was just one vendor. Maybe he thought, well, if I can sell one of these, then I'm making a massive profit. But then you got to pay for the stall as well. It's not as though you can go in there for free. I mean, the sellers, they pay for their stall. So that was, yeah, so there was some very overpriced stuff. Then there was others, most of the others were kind of what I'd expect. Some places had kind of $2, $3, $5 CDs, or 3 for 10, I think fair prices, and that kind of place, that's what I expect, especially after last time and having kind of seeing what the lay of the land was. I understand that at those kinds of places, that's the typical kind of average price is around 3 to 5. And then sometimes the odd time $10 for kind of rarer things. So I looked around all the places quite quickly because there wasn't that much stock. Didn't really see anything. There was one guy who had actually had some decent stuff, like a very mixed bag, but hasn't. But I think like I had almost all of it. Like anything that I thought, oh, that's good, but I thought, well, I've already got that. There was maybe one or two things I was kind of like maybe, but really I thought, well, if I'm just maybe, I don't need to really do that. The one thing I did buy was this, which is something I've been kind of on the lookout for a long time. It's a band that I've liked since this album came out in 1996. Probably I became aware of it in about 1997. And something interesting is that the seller had the 2 editions. And I didn't know there's 2 editions. I've only ever seen this one with the picture of the band on the front. But there's another edition with the artwork. I'll try and get it on my phone so I can see. But it's kind of like it's like a circuit board. It was kind of green and black. If you opened up an electronic item and you saw a circuitry board. But this is, if you don't know, this is Sneaker Pimps Becoming X. Let me see what this is. Which was released, like I said, in 1996. They're a UK, I'd say at this time, trip-hop, alternative trip-hop kind of band. and they got some fame. I believe that this album sold 1 million copies. I'm not sure if this is 1 million in the UK or 1 million worldwide. Probably 1 million worldwide. Here it is. That's the original cover. He had both copies there. He had one of this, which I bought, and that one. I'd never seen that before, so I was like, what's that? I couldn't understand, like, well, I could understand, but I was kind of a bit perplexed. But yeah, that's kind of like, I don't know, a little bit, I don't know, that he managed to find both, because it's not the super common album to find, but he managed to find both editions and sell them secondhand. So they put the genre as electronic trip hop. So it's the sticker, because the guy had 3 different categories. He had $3 CDs, $5 CDs, and $2 CDs, and the $5 CDs had these stickers on them. Way to go, with a bunny rabbit on a scooter. I wonder if that comes off. Well, I'm sure it does come off. I mean, I wonder if it comes off without leaving a sticky residue. Oh, it's ripping. Is it coming? Oh, yeah, there we go. Hooray, it comes off. It was covering that thing, whatever that is. Is that their symbol, maybe? So if you know these guys, I'd say the way that you know them is from the song 6 Underground, which was featured, the first time I saw it and became aware of it was on the Saint movie soundtrack. Remember The Saint, starring Val Kilmer, which had been around this time, 96, 97, probably 97. Yeah, I think it was a remake of like a TV show from the 1960s. I think he's like kind of like a, what is the Saint is like a cat burglar or something, or a spy. And they remade it, or not remade it, because of the TV series. They made a movie of it, updated in the 1990s with Val Kilmer. And this song was on the soundtrack. That song, 6 Underground. So the band was, well, so just talking about the condition, sorry, I should have said this was $5. The condition looks fine. It looks like it's from that, excuse me, it looks like it's from that era, the late 90s. It's kind of got some wear and tear for about almost 30-year-old CD. The case and jewel case is fine. Yep, no of the internal spokes missing. Yeah, there is a crack here, but nothing major. And then the CD itself is good. As I was saying, the band was made up of the female, who's kind of there in the forefront, Kelly Dayton, who is now goes by the name of Kelly Ali. She is mixed race, English, Irish, and Indian, I believe. You can kind of see a little bit in her face, maybe. Vocals, she's vocals, Liam Howe, keyboards, and Chris Corner, guitar. So that Liam Howe, not Howlett, but Liam Howe and Chris Corner are the kind of the core of the band. They formed the band together, and I think they're the only remaining members now. Then you got Joe Wilson and Dave Westlake, who were kind of recruited as, you know, I think almost for the tour, you know, to kind of round out the band. I guess that's all the lyrics. Also talks about some of the samples they use. Actually, I was thinking which one of the songs has a sample that's somewhat recognizable. What do they got? They got What a Baby contains sample from David Sylvan's recording. How Do, special voice contribution by Britt Eklund. Spin Spin Sugar, which was one of the singles, sample from Luciano Berio's Visage. 6 Underground contains excerpts from Golden Girl as performed by John Barry. I'm trying to think what part of that. Is it the kind of the main kind of like string melody? Dun, 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 dun. Or is it that vocal? What's up, that kind of one? I don't know, but this is, you know, of its time, because you may remember around that time, 96, 95, 96, 97 to 98, there was kind of a movement of this kind of British trip hop genre. And I guess Massive Attack were kind of the main figures of that, and maybe kind of some of the earliest. And then there's Tricky and Portishead, of course, and I think I'm forgetting a few other ones, but those are the ones that come to mind as kind of the biggest artists. And you know, Portishead obviously had a female vocalist, and Massive Attack used a range of vocalists, but I'd say some of their biggest songs were with female vocalists, like Unfinished Sympathy. Sympathy was it Shara Nelson, female, and Teardrop was Elizabeth Fraser, I believe, from Cockatoos Twins, and Protection was what's her name? Tracy Thorn from Everything But the Girl. Everything But the Girl, another kind of band you might put in that. They're a kind of more electronic dance side of things, and lesser to the trip hop, but I guess part of that overall kind of conversation. What's one of the other bigger songs? Teardrop, Protection, Unfinished Sympathy. Another song I'm forgetting. But obviously the band members themselves, like 3D and Grant Marshall, they would use their own vocals sometimes, and then they male vocalists sometimes, like Horace Andy featured a lot on a lot of their especially earlier stuff. Anyway, my point is that the female fronted or female vocalist trip hop act was kind of a thing, and you could imagine the record industry kind of looking around for similar type artists. And so from what I've read, the band was originally, and this album was originally written with just those two fellas, and she wasn't in the band. They shopped it around, record labels, and I think it was Virgin Records, which is what they signed, said, well, it's good, but how about getting a female vocalist? Because, you know, look at all these guys doing pretty well with female vocalists. And Liam and Chris said, well, okay. I'm not sure their reaction was, but obviously they agreed to it because they recruited Kelly Dayton / Ali. And this album was, you know, pretty successful. Like I said, they went platinum. Now, when I say platinum, is it, you can't really say platinum when it's worldwide singles, but I'm just seeing with certifications. Oh, here we go. Okay, well, 100,000 in the UK, so so they sold a million worldwide, because it says, I read that, maybe it wasn't on this. I was reading something the other night after I bought this, and it said they sold 1 million copies of this album. I'm just trying to see if it's here. But that would make sense, you know, if they sold 100,000 in the UK, another 900,000. You know, I would assume they probably did pretty well in Europe, and maybe okay in the US because of that tie-in with the movie soundtrack. These guys used to play the video for Six Underground on music TV here down in New Zealand, so I'm sure it got played in other countries as well. Also, I remember they did a collaboration with Marilyn Manson around that time. But what movie was it? Was it Spawn? I've got a feeling it was Spawn. Because again, the Spawn soundtrack, which is a soundtrack I don't have, which I've always been on the lookout, because that was kind of really of this time as well. And the big song from the Spawn soundtrack, which was at 97, was the Crystal Method with Richard Patrick from Filter, Trip Like I Do. That album, that Spawn album, I think that had like collaborations with kind of electronic artists and alternative rock metal artists. I've got a feeling there was one with, I'm mixing things up, Kurt Hammett with DJ Shadow or something, or DJ Spooky, and Orbital with someone. Anyway, that's neither here nor there, but I'm sure that kind of, you know, in that day and age, back in the mid-late 90s, being on a film soundtrack was really a huge opportunity. and kind of guaranteed you at least a minimum of a couple of 100,000 sales. U2 talked about that. You know, they didn't really do it with that intention. It was more tongue in cheek. But after they had done Achtung Baby and Zeropa in the kind of early to mid 90s, someone, I think Brian Eno made a comment like, well, it seems like all the biggest albums on the charts at the moment are movie soundtracks. And all those things like, you know, The Bodyguard and Titanic and Lion King, Sleepless in Seattle. These all had really big movie soundtracks. What's that one? Four Weddings and a Funeral. And he kind of said, tongue in cheek, we should make a movie soundtrack. And so that's why U2 put together that project Passengers, which was basically a U2 album with maybe more influence from Brian Eno, more input from Brian Eno, but it was basically just a U2 album. And because movie soundtracks were so kind of a way to sell and kind of get your music out there. And that's the key, kind of bring your music to a larger audience, you know. And so maybe I'm sure that helped these guys with album sales and fame and all the rest of it. So I've obviously heard the singles off this, and like I said, the first song I ever heard off this was Six Underground, which even after all these years is still, I think, like these guys are nowhere near as good as Massive Attack or Portishead, but that song is kind of like a perfect, puts all those elements of that stuff together and packages it in a perfect kind of 3.5, 4 minute song. That kind of very ambient, dark, slinky, with the female slightly kind of sexy-ish voice, and kind of have this like late night feeling with the drum machine beat underneath it, with some samples used throughout. It's kind of like, if you wanted one example of that era, of the late kind of 97-ish era of that kind of music, that song is really it, I think, Six Underground. Brilliant song. The other song that I'm familiar with is Spin Spin Sugar, which is also a great song. I think Tesco Suicide was a single. I've got a feeling. I think I either read that or knew it before, but I've never really been a fan of that song. And her vocals kind of ruin it for me, the way she kind of delivers it with that accent. She really kind of turns up the, all right, you know, I can't do the British, whatever she's from. That I think she's from Birmingham. I think she's not singing with a Brummie accent, but she's turning it up. You know, another band, this is not related. But you know, singing with your own accent sometimes is great. And sometimes I really like hearing that, where they're not doing the American accent, you know, kind of like American accent is the default, that even New Zealand bands put on American accents sometimes when they sing songs. And you think, well, why are you saying news? We don't say news, we say news. But anyway, that song, that band Republica, and they had that one song that was used for like 1 million TV ads, advertising, Ready to Go. And the singer, I think her name was Saffron, sung with quite a strong English accent. And I always loved that about that song, because I don't know, it gave it this kind of a earthiness or something, that she was singing how she spoke. But at the same time, sometimes when you turn up an accent and kind of spit the words with the accent, it kind of can detract from the song. It's like a southerner in America, like really turning up the twang, and it's almost like overdone. Well, that song, Tesco Suicide, kind of has that feeling to me. Another song that I really like, and this is the last song, How Do. It's got again a kind of a great example of that era of kind of music, electronic infused alternative type stuff. So I'm not saying this is the greatest trip hop electronic album of the late 90s or anywhere near it, but I think it's a good example of it, and it's got some great songs on it. I was surprised that it was kind of rated quite in the mid-range when I was looking at this, like how kind of at the time the kind of ratings that it was receiving from the critical reception, shall we say. So it's okay, so All Music got 4 stars. I guess it's not terrible. These aren't terrible ratings, but maybe I expected a little bit higher. B pluses, 2 stars, but that's 2 out of 4 from the LA Times. 3 out of 5, 5 out of 10, 6.3. Q gives it 3. Q's are usually a good judge, I feel. Rolling Stone 3. Okay, so maybe I'm over exaggerating. That's a pretty decent-ish scores. I guess I would probably give it a 3.5, with some songs getting a 4. And I think that Six Underground song's kind of like a classic, so you'd even give it like a 4 out of 5. But the album as a whole, maybe 3 out of 5. That's what it says here. Becoming X received mostly positive reviews from contemporary critics, who often compared Sneaker Pimps to trip-hop artists like Portishead and Tricky. I'm sure Jeff Barrow was happy with that, the old grouch. Interestingly, that this band kind of imploded after this, and kind of was really a, I don't know, a lesson, an example of shooting yourself in the foot to an extent. So they toured. You imagine they would have toured this quite heavily. I'm sure the record label wanted to wring everything they could, and it inevitably led to tensions. And especially when you think about that, this band was not created organically, in that the 2 core members, well, obviously I think they were childhood friends or something, but then they put these other 3 people into the band who were basically just recruits. And then they had this girl who was fronting the band, was really the focal point of the band. And, they don't know her very well at all. That halter top style, remember in the late 90s? If you went to like a nightclub in the late 90s, I think every single female there was wearing that style halter top. But you can imagine when they had interviews and stuff like that, she would have been very much the focal point. And whatever, there was tensions, and maybe those could have been personality clashes. It's not necessarily jealousy. And saying that, though, I've heard some comments and interviews afterwards where it did sound like jealousy. But anyway, there were tensions, and basically by the end of the tour, things weren't very good. Then they basically fired her and decided to make the next album without her, with, I'm not sure which of those 2, if it was Chris or Liam being the vocalist, singing their own songs. Now, when Virgin heard this, they weren't very happy, as one can imagine. It was their idea in the first place to get a female vocalist in. It had proved pretty successful. They'd sold 1 million copies, albums around the world. They'd been able to tour. They'd been featured on movie soundtracks. They had a good kind of foundation there to kind of come back with an even bigger second album. Maybe. By the end of the 90s, you could say that this sound was kind of winding down a little bit, at least in the mainstream. Trip hop's place in the mainstream was pretty short-lived, really. Obviously, like I said, bands like Massive Attack were so, great that they could kind of keep it going under the steam of their own brilliance. But even them, their albums that they had in the early 2000s, like what's their 100th window, 100th floor window, the one with the breaking glass on the front, and in Heligoland or whatever, they were nowhere near the releases that Mezzanine was in the popular consciousness. But anyway, my point is that it wasn't a recipe for success to be firing your front person and the focal point of the band, and the kind of person that everyone identified the band with. And so Virgin said, well, if you're going to do that, you don't have a record contract anymore. See you later. And so they dropped them. Undeterred, they continued, and I think they went back to the earlier, might actually be on here. Yeah, Clean Up. I think Clean Up was the earlier one. Like, I think they released this on Clean Up. I should have read this beforehand, but anyway, it's not really that important. And then Virgin heard it, and then they re-released it with major label backing and distribution in 97. But they had to go back to Clean Up. with their tails between their legs, maybe. And they released their second album, which was Splinter, which I used to own. I bought it back in like 99, 2000. It would have been 2000 because I remember the house I was living in, I was flatting in at the time. The single off that was Low Five, which again is a brilliant song. These guys are great songwriters. I'm not saying like they only were famous because of her. I'm from my point of view, they had some really good songs, and that album Splinter was a great album. Incidentally, my copy was destroyed by an angry ex-girlfriend, like literally. I think she had bought it for me as a gift, and we got into an argument, and she like destroyed it, like smashed it to pieces, like some kind of psychopath. Anyway, this is a long time. It's like literally like 25 years ago, but you know, it was a great album. But it was those guys. It was just the men. I think they still had maybe some other players, maybe the same guys, Dave Westlake and whatever the bass player was. But she was gone, is my point. And one of those guys was singing Low Five. And I'm pretty sure, I'm going to actually look, that on the front cover of that album Splinter, they had a picture of just one of the, I might be wrong. Yeah, okay, it's that one there. It is a picture. I thought it was his face for some reason, but it's not his face. Now, it'll be interesting to see what this sold. Okay, there's not even certifications. That would probably mean that they didn't sell very much at all. Reception. Yeah, 3 or 4 out of... no, it doesn't say anything about sales. So it was released at the end of 99. Yeah, so I really think it didn't really do much at all. But it's a good album. It was a good album. I haven't actually listened to it for about 20 some years, but that song Low Five, I still still comes up in like trip hop mixes and stuff like that. I still listen to it. It's got a video with judo. I remember like people doing judo throws. So yeah, kind of like a they lost all their steam and their popularity, and I feel like I said, I heard interviews. They think they did like a tour or a promotional tour of New Zealand, maybe not playing shows, but just doing promotion down here. And then in the interview, they talked about her and said that she was thinking she was the most important part of the band, and so therefore they fired her because they were all her songs. Basically, it sounded like there was some jealousy, and it's so silly because it's like I've said this before, like the chances of a band, an artist, breaking through into the major leagues, the mainstream, major league, however you want to term it, is so infinitesimally small. Like 1 in a million, or maybe even less. And then sabotaging yourself after finding fame because of some form of jealousy. It's just kind of unbelievable. In saying that, maybe the personality tensions were too much to work with and they just could not work with her, I don't know, but they could have got another female vocalist. I don't know. I wasn't there. But anyway, so yeah, that's what I got. This is what when I was walking out, someone handed this to me out the front door. Stimmung Choir. Apparently this, because just by chance, the day after, yesterday afternoon, I was reading a newspaper article about someone who's a member of this. This is like a choir, I believe. But it looks like they got some backing from something. And they sing like alternative rock and metal, kind of like I said, performing songs by Nirvana, Smashing Pumpkins, Queens of the Stone Age, Radiohead. Mikey Havoc, who's watching this will know who he is, but he used to be kind of famous in New Zealand in the 90s and early 2000s. He's part of this, and he's doing a version of Warpix. Oh, there it says, right there, Mikey Havoc, I didn't see that. Troy King, I haven't heard of these other people. I've heard the name Troy King, but I don't know who it is. Diane Swan, don't know. Paul Clancy, Jasmine Mary Jesse Casson, Esther Stevens, Nico, Vella, and Mikey Videotape. Don't know who any of those people are. I do know Mikey Havoc though. So they're playing the Auckland Town Hall, like a choir version of those songs, which I guess the concept's kind of fun and interesting. Not the kind of thing I'd go along to because I don't know, kind of those tribute. You see those quite a lot nowadays. Tribute acts, and they play like sizable venues. I'm not saying they're playing like arenas or anything, but kind of places like the Power Station, which it's like 1,000 capacity. You see like a Deftones tribute act, or it's not just one band. It'll be like a new metal tribute act, so they'll do songs from Limp Bizkit and Korn and System of a Down, etc. And it's kind of strange, like for me to think like who would be going to these things, but obviously people do because they're playing decent sized venues. Yeah, so we'll leave it there. Half an hour of blabbing about sneaker pimps, the sneaker pimps. I think it's just sneaker pimps without the definite article. Anyway, thanks for watching.